Hello and welcome to Rach Aquarelle. Tonight I am just working on a couple of little sketches for an actual oil painting. I've now done the oil painting as well. I think that I might want to have another go at all of this, but it didn't turn out bad or anything like that. There's just some issues that I encountered in the composition that I think that I could do better on. This composition was a little bit tricky just because I combined two different photographs, and I will just show you those really quick. So this is the photo that really inspired me. I just really liked the trees and kind of the colors. This one I just happened to take. I don't even really know why, but then I kind of combined them to create this, and I like to add lines when I'm just kind of brainstorming compositions. I took all of those photographs, or both of them, I guess it's just two photos, out the window of my mom's car as we were driving to an airport. And, sometimes I just see things and I'll grab my phone really quick and snap a picture, and then I look back at the photograph and can't really tell what it was that caught my eye. But good thing I took that boring picture of just the short grass, and you can actually, if you look back, you'll see that there's an airplane wing in there because we were actually just lifting off. So who knows, but it worked out, and I ended up just using my little Pixlr photo editing tool on my phone to combine those because I liked the trees in that first composition a lot, and I liked the tall grass, but there just wasn't enough like pulling me into the composition. So I used that short grass and some of the lines in the grass, even though actually in the photo the lines in the grass were really straight. I decided to kind of curve those in and create some curved furrows, but that just kind of helped inspire that. And because this is kind of a tricky composition because there's not a lot of variation in color, so I'm going to do two different sketches here. One in ink. This is just India ink that I like to paint with, so I can kind of start thinking about values and how to make this composition work so that it has enough contrast and also so it feels cohesive. The advantage of using both of those photographs was that I took them on the same day and kind of the same conditions, so I didn't really have any issues as far as the lighting and the atmosphere feeling disjointed, but still it's just kind of a made-up composition, and I wanted to make sure I could make it really work. So figured I would just do it really quick in black and white, figure out the values, and then do a quick color sketch as well. This video won't be a really great example of how I use India ink because I'm actually on a tilted surface here, and I have bevels on this thing. It's kind of a desk easel, I guess, and I mostly use it for oil painting, but I have a bevel so that I could actually sit my watercolor palette down on it and it wouldn't slide off, but I didn't really have anywhere to put my inks. So the way that I like to paint with ink, and I often will use either India ink or Sumi ink. If I think that I might go over it with watercolor, I'll use India ink since it tends to be more waterproof. And so that's what I'm using today because I wasn't sure. I thought I might do a wash either under or over the ink. But anyway, what I do is I just dip my brush into the India ink, and then I put that little bit of ink onto a mixing palette, and then I use water to water it down to get different values. And it's a little bit tricky to judge what value you're going to get because on the palette it looks pretty black no matter how much water you put into it unless you add a lot. And then sometimes I'll think that I have a really light wash, but it'll end up being a lot darker than anticipated. But I usually sketch with ink just because it's really quick, and I think that value is so important, so you really want to nail that. Now I'm going to, on the other side, do a quick study in watercolor. And I'm using the R.M.Broadwell Cityscape palette again. I think that I'm kind of addicted to this color palette. I love it. I think it's because I really love fall, and the colors just work so well for fall. And plus, I've mentioned before, but lately I've been really interested in and using the Zorn palette, especially with my oil paintings. So that's basically a black, yellow ochre, a kind of medium cadmium red, and then white. And then you use that to create a painting. And so the biggest thing about that is that there's no blue. And I've found that that's been really interesting to try to paint without blue. And it just so happened that this Cityscape palette that I bought from R.M.Broadwell doesn't have a blue, it has Payne's Gray. So it's very similar. It doesn't have yellow ochre, but with red and yellow and sepia, you can get pretty close to yellow ochre. So this is the Payne's Gray. And so it's just a very cool, neutral color, and I love it. I've loved using it. I know that I'm going to have to buy another tube of Payne's Gray really fast. So I'm just kind of laying in this wash very generally. And I cut it out just now, but I let that dry for several minutes so that I could go in really dark on the sky and not have any unintentional bleeding in these trees. I didn't really leave myself enough space to really capture the different heights and shapes of the trees in this composition. I actually, with my oil painting that I did afterwards, I did a little bit better of a job with that. So this dark color that I'm using for these trees is Payne's Gray and Hansa Yellow. And I think one of my favorite things about this palette is mixing yellow with the Payne's Gray and getting this kind of very dull green that, especially in the fall, but really in general, it's a color I see around me a lot, and it's a color that I actually have come to really like. If you had asked me a couple of years ago what my least favorite color was, I would have said it was like puke green. And I don't want to call this puke green, but I mean, it kind of is. It's just a very dull green, and I think it's an acquired taste maybe. And now I have that taste. It's kind of funny how your taste can change over time, and I no longer see it as puke green. I just kind of see it as a very neutral, kind of mellow green. It makes me feel very mellow. I really like it. So I think too, just having an appreciation for the landscapes around me. I live in central Nebraska, so it's not maybe the most stunning landscapes. We don't have any mountains. We don't even really have any hills other than ones that we actually had to just make ourselves. And really, I don't think very many trees are even native to this region. So, landscape is pretty flat. Sometimes there's a lot going on in the sky. But lately, I've been really fascinated with grasses and native plants, prairies. So I think that's what I partially wanted to capture in this composition. I really liked the shapes of the trees. I felt like that had a nice rhythm to it that really inspired me. I also like the color contrast between kind of these more neutral greens and grays and then the vivid reds and oranges that are beginning to come out. And now I'm going to start adding some darker values throughout the foreground, and that's going to help to add a lot of structure to it and also to better emphasize those implied lines that I'm trying to use to draw the eye of the viewer into the composition, because that was really important to me, because without that, this composition, it was pretty flat. It was just kind of layered. I think it still kind of is a little bit layered, which, you know, you can love it or hate it. I kind of like that look. I can't even really think of examples of artists who, well, you know, I guess you see it a lot in like folk art, or that's how I would describe it anyway. Just kind of layers within the landscape. Now I'm going in with some Payne's Gray and the Pyrrole Red, which kind of creates a nice, rich violet, I guess. And then this is just pure Payne's Gray right here. I think let's see, what am I doing? I'm not, oh, I guess I already have added some of the trunks and branches. So I think I'm just trying to further distinguish those distant trees from the tall grasses in front of them. Just adding a little bit more contrast. Kind of doing some dry brush. I should have been using a larger brush because that brush was just a little too small. And now I don't do this very often, but I've just added some white gouache to my palette, because if you think back to my photographs, the foreground was very, very muted and light. And really, when I was thinking about how I wanted this composition to come together, I really liked the idea of a nice bright stripe of like orange and red going right through the middle of the composition where those tall grasses are. So it's pretty impossible to go and create more muted colors with watercolor. It's a little easier. Actually, it's really easy with oil paint. But in order to kind of subdue these bright colors that are distracting, and I think they're just a bit much, I'm just going to start mixing some white gouache into my watercolors so that I can kind of go over and tone some of that down. I still want a lot of contrast and dark colors in the immediate foreground where those furrows are starting to form and they're a little bit stronger. So it's really toward the midground, right where this short grass is meeting the tall grass, that I want to kind of quiet it down just a little bit. And I bought this gouache a while ago, and you know what I did? I squeezed it into my palette and thought I could use it just like watercolor, but apparently gouache doesn't reactivate quite as well as just your typical watercolors. So what I've learned is that you should just squeeze out the gouache that you're going to use while you're painting, and then rather than just letting it dry out and then trying to use it later, just squeeze out as much as you need, and then you're just going to wipe it off and get out more when you need it. So that's why I don't use gouache very often, because I feel like that's a little bit wasteful and it bothers me. But it really helped in this situation to use just a little bit of white. I do want to use my gouache more. I have just a very few colors of it. I think just, a yellow, red, blue, and a black and a white. And I haven't used them much. Oh, another reason why I think that I'm enjoying this particular color palette so much is that it really kind of reminds me of Andrew Wyeth. So I think if you go and kind of look at some of his paintings, not just, the one painting he's most famous for, but look at all of his work, and I think you'll see what I mean. And lately I've just been really drawn to his work and how subdued and quiet it is. And yet there's always some sense of life going on as well. So I think that this palette kind of lends itself to that. And I'm just about done here. I'm just kind of fiddling around, I think. I almost immediately after finishing this sketch, I thought, you know, maybe I should have just gone in with some of that white gouache and just given it like a horizontal wide dry brush stroke all across the foreground. I still haven't done that. I might do it just in my own time just to see what happens. I'm pretty happy overall with how the sketches turned out. And the oil painting, I don't know. I just finished it a few minutes ago, right before I started doing this voiceover. And so sometimes when I do a painting and I spend quite a lot of time on it, like I think I spent at least an hour on the oil painting. So sometimes when you have your nose up to it for so long and you're kind of struggling with it, it's hard to judge whether or not it was a winner or not. So we'll see. I might end up redoing it. And I had a lot of paint left on the palette, and I just thought these colors were so interesting, so that's why I'm adding these little swatches underneath the sketch. I don't usually do that, but, you know, if I have leftover paint, why not? Again, I just really don't like wasting, so. And I think that is it. And of course, I always like to clean everything off right away. Really helps just for me to kind of signal to myself that I'm done. I'm not going to fidget with it anymore. And it's time to move on. All right, so here it is. Actually, you know, looking back at the video, rewatching myself painting it, I like how it turned out actually. So I'm pretty happy. The sketches are winners. The oil painting, jury's still out on that. All right, thanks guys. Have a good day. Bye.